Hi, my name is Chris Haley, and I'm on the advisory board of the Annapolis Film Festival. And welcome to the African American Experience. And this year's film, which is a short, a very special short that we have proudly to present to you, which you probably have just seen, which is called A Concerto is a Conversation. And we're very fortunate today to have the two directors with us to speak with us a little bit about the film, Chris Bowers and Ben Proudfoot. And the crowd went wild. Yeah! How are you guys?
We're good.
Excellent. Thank you both for being here so much. And I just want to tell you that the movie is so touching, and the cinematography is great. I mean, the visual is great, the story is great, and the music, Chris, is quite good as well. And I think one of the first things I just want to ask you is that when you came up, well, who came up with the idea? I mean, you guys are co-directors, so obviously that's a concept in and of itself that I feel like our viewers will want to know. What does that mean when you're a co-director? Because so many people feel like there's a producer, there's executive producers, there's all these names at the end of a movie, before a movie, and then there's a director, and he's the boss. And then there's a co-director. So how does that work out?
It's a very good question. Well, I'll take credit for the impetus, but the idea of what the movie turned out into being was a total joint creation. I wanted to make I thought the interesting movie was about Chris, like a little short 3-minute thing about Chris writing a piece for the concert hall as a film composer. I said, oh, that'd be a sweet little film about Chris, a film composer, writing a piece for the concert hall. So I called Chris and I said, hey, we've been friends for a number of years, and would you let me make a film about you? You know, we could shoot on 16mm film, be sort of fun, it'd take a couple afternoons. And I went over to his studio to talk to him, and he was all dressed up in a suit. And I said, how come you're all dressed up? And he said, oh, I just came from a dedication ceremony for my grandfather. And this block in South LA on Central has been named the Bowers Retail Square. And I, just sort of started pulling that thread a little bit. And Chris told me the story that's in the film about how his grandfather had hitchhiked from Bascom, Florida to Los Angeles in, post-war America. And as he told this story, which is more or less the exact narrative thread that you see in the film, I just thought, you know what? That's a much more interesting thing than Chris sitting at the piano in the wee hours trying to figure out what this concerto is going to be. We kind of locked eyes and we came around this new idea, which is creating a dedication to Chris's grandfather, couched in this thread about Chris writing the concerto.
Well, that was a great idea. I mean, it's how fortuitous that you had a nice suit of clothes on that day, because
pays to be well dressed. Yeah.
Who knows where you would have gone otherwise.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's really amazing that happened in that way, and also for Ben to be so. I think Ben's done this so many times with his company Breakwater, that he's really good at spotting the story in those moments where, like, being able to chuck this idea of what he thought the film would be for this larger idea of what we could do with my grandfather's story, I think was really inspiring to me. And then the conversation itself, I feel like just, we didn't have, other than Ben and I talked about this idea. He had mentioned trying to show, like, my family going from slavery to the Walt Disney Concert Hall and wanting that to be our North Star that we try to follow as we're working on the film. But the conversation itself was really open, and it was really just me sitting down with my grandfather, just asking him questions that I wanted to capture, questions that I wanted to and get answers for myself, or any of that kind of stuff, and me just being excited about sitting down with him for this amount of time. And the whole film becoming about not only my grandfather's story, but also like this imposter syndrome that I'm dealing with, and what it's like to be a Black composer in Hollywood, and all that kind of stuff is really stuff that just came from this conversation, and being in this really comfortable and intimate and vulnerable space with my grandfather. And it's really great that this conversation and a lot of his story as a whole is what was able to give us this North Star to continue to use as a guide throughout the process.
Well, how surprising was it to your grandfather that you come up? Because I mean, obviously he knows your career. You show in the movie that he knows about your career. He's very proud of you. He shows you how to iron. You know, he shows you how to take care of clothes and things of that sort. And then all of a sudden you come in there and you start talking about movies. You start talking about composing, and then you start. How do you broach it to him that, by the way, Pops, I want this to be about you? And for him to accept that, yeah, that's what the idea of this is about. How challenging or easy was that?
You know, I don't think he was expecting it to be as much about him as it ended up being. I think he was just like, you know, you want to hear my story. And he's always been so happy to share that story. And I feel like it's something that, you know, that journey was such a difficult and trying journey that he experienced in silence, in the darkness. And, you know, for him to be able to bring that story to light, I think it's something that he's been telling our family for years. And as far as sharing it, I think he's always been open to that. But, you know, once he saw the film, firstly, this is the first time I ever saw my grandfather get emotional about anything. And he was so touched with how we represented him, how his story came to life and all of that. And again, I don't think he was expecting it to look that way or feel that way. He constantly says, you know, you guys came over and shot this thing. And I was like, I don't know what you guys are doing with this thing and what you're filming, but sounds good. And I'm happy to share the story. And now it's turned into this whole journey with Sundance and Ava and now the Oscars and all that kind of stuff. And so I think he's pretty speechless and overwhelmed that him just sharing his story has turned into this, you know, reaction and this much love for the film.
But is he comfortable with being like Brad Pitt now? I mean, he's like.
My grandmother said that that she might have to start widening some of the doorways and hallways in our house, their house, just to, you know, let his head get through. Essentially, he told my aunt that he's changing the world and you know, feels like he's having a huge impact, and he's pretty blown away. I don't think he could have ever expected for anybody to know his name on this level, and yeah, he's pretty surprised by it all. That's for sure.
Oh, that's amazing. That's so good. I mean, and as friends, I feel like for one thing, when you decided, I mean, Ben, you come into this with one idea, and then in seeing your friend Chris, it develops into another idea, which becomes basically a family story. So you're a friend of the family. So how challenging is it for you to sort of be an objective filmmaker, and yet you're also a family friend who's watching this interaction, so that you're not in the way, and that if you make any suggestions, you're not in the way. You're just helping them be more, I guess, engaging with the camera. How challenging or engaging or fun was that for you?
Yeah, well, you know, I'm not a journalist.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I wouldn't claim that any of the films that I've made are objective. I would say that they're truthful. But I mean, clearly I adore Chris and I adore his grandfather and I adore his family, and I think everybody should pay attention to their story, and the sort of impetus of the celebratory, I think, tone that we took, especially at the end of the film, is sort of how I feel about it. You know, I just see our jobs, you know, in creatively directing the film, is to just lift up Chris's grandfather's story, and to give context to Chris's success, and show that, you know, this decision that Chris's grandfather made in, you know, whenever, 1946, really sort of changed the course of history. And you know, it's been an honor. I mean, this is what you dream about, right? Normally, as a filmmaker, you get to contribute to a stranger who you don't know and help tell their story, but to be able to be a part of that for your friend and for Chris's family, and just to, you know, think about that, how Horace is receiving this in his 92nd year. I mean,
That's great.
You know, I know it's going to be one of the things I'll be most proud of in my life, for sure.
Well, I guess along the lines of what the story is about, how did it affect when you decided to add music to it, because that is the core of what you both, I mean, Ben, that is what you were thinking of. You were thinking of covering your friend, preparing for a concert. And then Chris, that's what you're known for, is composing scores for movies. And then here's your own movie. And this is not only your own movie, it's kind of an autobiographical movie. So how did you sort of come by, I guess, the genesis of, now we're looking at the footage and now we're creating the music that fits this footage? I mean, how much is that when it's not somebody else's script, it's not some other actors, it's like you're the co-star.
We'll have to ask the film's composer. Oh,
he's here. How about that?
Yeah, I think the first thing was, it was really interesting to see how the concerto became a character in the film and how much that started to feed into the sound of the film. The concerto itself is called For a Younger Self, and I wrote it with this idea of, thinking about times in my life where I had to go through something really difficult or trying or uncomfortable, and what it feels like to push through that discomfort and getting to the other side. And so it really became quite a cathartic thing working on the concerto itself, but then to now see what this film became once we got into post-production and started to see, how Ben and our editor, Lucas Dong, had cut the film and what the shape of it was. And also at that point, they really had carved out a spot for the concerto to appear, where we have this really lyrical moment from the concerto that appears in the film. And it appears at, like, for me, like the height of the emotion, that's like right before he talks about, I just hope I had something to do with it. And like all these feelings, these moments in the film that feel really emotional to watch. And so I knew I needed to set up that moment with the concerto in a way where it would feel earned and not feel out of place. And a lot of that came down to figuring out what the palette would be and finding a palette that could feel much smaller throughout the course of the film, but at the same time give us a texture and a palette that would set up that moment with the concerto in a way that didn't feel like, oh wait, why are we watching a different film in this moment? And the other thing that Ben and I talked about from the very beginning was trying to find a way to use the themes from the concerto throughout the score for the film. And so given that I had this, hero's journey narrative that I had painted with the concerto, it was actually quite a fun process to then take these themes and look at my grandfather as our hero and think about the stories and start to write these pieces of music against his story. And so for me, the scoring process is always an emotional one, where I watch something and try to interpret what feelings we're supposed to feel as an audience, what feelings our protagonist feels, or what the perspective is in this scene, or any of those kinds of things. And then I just try to like improvise or play something to picture that can get at those feelings. And with that process, it's often like me putting myself in the shoes of that protagonist or in the shoes of some of our characters in the film. And so in this instance, it was pretty easy and honestly quite surreal to be thinking of my grandfather again as this hero, that I was putting myself in his shoes and trying to write music that felt that way. And so, if he's telling a story about how he called all these different dry cleaners pretending to be, a placement, I feel like with something like that, the story itself has the momentum and excitement and all those different things that we want to represent in the score. And so, yeah, just kind of approaching it that way, I felt like was the easiest way. And then the only other thing that I think we did that was really beneficial to the scoring process was, for any of the moments talking about the family, we thought about using How Great Thou Art as like a bit of a seed for some of the theme for the family. And that's like the only theme in the score that isn't from the concerto, is like this variation on How Great Thou Art. And it appears only twice in the film, once where my grandfather talks about growing up with his family and singing on the porch and all those things. And then with my childhood and my personal story and all of that. And Ben had a really great idea with that section with my career, where we talked about me just playing that piece free and rubato and playing it, just trying to get the music to feel the way I wanted that moment to feel. And that piece itself, especially in the context of this film and thinking about its connection to How Great Thou Art, and that piece from my family and all that stuff, that that cue started to become for me like a representation of gratitude or appreciation for my family, and so being able to play it freely, kind of just focusing on that feeling and trying to play from that emotion. And then Ben and our editor Lucas cut to the music instead of the other way around. And I feel like that was also really helpful for that whole section of the film to flow in a really natural way.
No, I mean, it's very clear what you guys did with that, I think. And what's also, I thought, very evocative about it is that just the slightly different use of a camera angle with what was primarily a two-person film. And the fact that you had direct address for yourself, mostly when you were talking to the camera, where you're looking there. And so you're directly addressing the audience to sort of be in your eyes, to be in your shoes as you're talking to your grandfather, the hero. And whenever you're talking in terms of, as you said, the piece's younger self, whenever we talk of biographies, it's the person and it's their parents, and it's also the grandparents. It always goes back generations. And the fact that you were able to incorporate that so well within words, with visually, and with music was really, I think that's one reason why you're up for the Oscar, because you just did it so well. So whose idea was it to do that direct address? Because that in and of itself is, I think the first time it happens, you're kind of surprised as a viewer. And then the second time you're like, oh, this is interesting. Look at what they're doing here. Okay, I'm getting it. I'm liking this.
Yeah, well, it was Errol Morris's idea in the 1970s.
Okay.
But which I stole, and I started using that, and then I had always sort of basically it's a teleprompter system, right?
Yeah.
That allows you to, instead of words, it's the director's face. And I had always thought, oh, maybe we could have two of these at the same time, two people talking to each other. And so I always had that in the back of my mind. And when, Chris and I had that first conversation where it sort of, just this tower of ideas came together in that first meeting as it did, I asked the stupid question that now tens of thousands of people are asking, what the hell is a concerto? And Chris said, well, it's a conversation between a soloist and an orchestra. And when he said that word conversation, I thought, this is where we could use the two cameras. And, that's when it became a more involved thing. Because as a director, normally that's your major contribution in the writing of the film, is that interview and where you're going to take the story. And so that became, Chris's torch to carry through of how what he was going to talk to his grandfather about and which elements of the story he was going to pull out. And it worked. Not everybody likes it. Some people have called, think it's a little bit, distracting, or, that it violates film grammar. We like it. And the idea is that it's personal and it's intimate and you feel like you're inside of the conversation. And that it's almost, probably at the beginning, it is uncomfortably intimate. But hopefully by the end, we've got you. That's the hope.
No, I think from my point of view, it does become comfortable. I mean, it's just, I think to some degree, you're, I guess from an actor's point of view, you're concerned, you're worried, will that person be nervous? Because Chris, obviously you're around actors, you're around producers because you're a composer of movies, and Ben, you're a director, so you're aware of this. But for your grandfather, who helps people, he's in the service industry, it may be more disconcerting to him to have that camera staring and know it's on all the time. But you didn't notice that. I mean, after a while, yes, he's looking away from the camera, but he's enjoying being with you. And I think because he's enjoying being with you, he's enjoying the conversation, we're enjoying the conversation. And we're enjoying the journey that you've allowed us to share with you, and enjoying what Ben coerced you into doing. So
yeah, it kept getting more and more involved. It was supposed to be like one afternoon. It kept getting more and more involved, and here we are, like, a year and a half later, and now it's a full-time job. So sorry, Chris.
But of course, the obvious question is, because this happens so many times, and so obvious, and I know I'm not the first, I can guess I'm not the first person to ask. If I am, I want $5, is that this is your beginning. This is your 13-minute movie that's up for an Oscar. If it was anybody else's movie, if it was a regular feature, what would be the next question the producer would probably ask? Okay, so let's see if we can expand this into a full-length feature. Let's see how we can do that. And so has that crossed your minds? And if so, I just want a story idea, story credit. That's all.
Yeah, well, we've been really toying with the idea of how to explore this concept to different people and other stories. You know, we're trying to, I think the biggest benefit from this for me and my family, just looking at how much my family now has this really beautiful film to be able to reflect on and share amongst our own family and all that kind of stuff. But you know, it's this huge pride for our family and this connection to our own story in a way that maybe we hadn't even that we on some level kind of took for granted. You know, everything about my aunt, who's my grandfather's daughter, who runs the Cleaners now, and she even told me how much she appreciated this film for her even being able to look at her father's story in a different way and being able to appreciate that story in a completely new way, seeing this film. And so I feel like Ben and I have been talking about how to just do that for other people, how we can find other people that have incredible relationships with their elders, and how we can share those stories, and how we can help capture these stories before these people aren't with us, and those stories leave this earth with them, and you know, wanting to give those people their flowers while they're still here. So I think that's the idea that we've expanded upon, or we're trying to expand upon, is how we can facilitate these conversations in other areas with other families and other cultures and all of that.
Well, excellent. That's great. Well, I want to thank you guys again for being a part of the Annapolis Film Festival and our African American experience. And I want to say break a leg, as we say in the theater world, for that auspicious occasion. And I'll be definitely looking very closely at how well dressed you are, because I know that your grandfather will also be looking at how well dressed you are. Now, is there any way that we can keep in touch with you, that the viewers can know how to keep up with Chris Bowers and Ben Proudfoot, what your next projects are?
Yeah, social media for me, like Chris Bowers Music, or I think all my handles, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, Chris Bowers Music, Chris with a K. Yeah, for me.
Okay.
And I'm Breakwater Studios and BG Proudfoot. I also have to mention, since this is the Annapolis Film Festival,
yes,
that our producer on the film, Jeremy Lambert, is from Bowie, Maryland.
Oh, hello.
And also Joey Lambert, his brother, also from Bowie. And I've been to Annapolis visiting their family, and the Lamberts are local, and so I just wanted to call out that connection to the area.
Oh, that's good. They're right here, right now. Lamberts? Oh, I'm so sorry. Just thought I'd throw that in there. Well, hey, thanks again, you guys, for being here today, and I hope you enjoy the virtual Annapolis Film Festival this year. And again, break a leg that special day.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.